was lacing up my boots when my phone lit up on the kitchen counter. I almost didn't look. I was already running 7 minutes late, and my brother had texted twice that morning reminding me that his wife had made her famous tourtière and it would go cold. Family Sunday lunch, the one thing he insisted on keeping sacred since our parents retired to the Okanagan. I grabbed the phone to silence it. It wasn't my brother. It was Gwen Alcott, my notary. Do not go to that lunch. Call me right now. I mean right now, Simone. I stood there with one boot on and one boot off, reading the message 3 times. Gwen is not a dramatic person. Gwen is the kind of woman who double staples documents and arrives 11 minutes early to every appointment. She has never sent me a text without punctuation in her life, let alone a text like that. I called her. She picked up before the first ring finished. Tell me you haven't signed anything recently, she said. No, hello. What? No. Signed what? I heard her exhale slowly, the kind of exhale that means someone is choosing their words very carefully. I need you to come to my office. Not tomorrow, now. And Simone, do not tell your brother you're not coming. I should back up. Our parents own a property in the Eastern Townships, not a mansion, not anything glamorous, a 90-acre farm property outside of Notary, Quebec, that my grandfather bought in the 1960s for almost nothing, and that has sat in our family ever since. Old farmhouse, a barn that leans slightly to the left, and a woodlot that backs onto a creek. To anyone driving by, it looks like nothing. To a developer, because of the way the region has grown in the last decade, it is worth somewhere between $2.2 and $2.8 million, depending on the season and who's asking. My parents are both in their early 70s. My father had a small stroke 2 years ago. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to change things. Enough to make my brother very attentive, very suddenly. My brother is 4 years older than me. He lives 20 minutes from our parents' retirement place in Kelowna. I'm in Montreal. I'm a graphic designer with my own small studio. No partner, no children. My brother has a wife, 2 kids, a house, and, I have learned, a very specific sense of what he is owed. His wife. I'll call her my sister-in-law because that's what she is, though the word feels wrong now, is the kind of person who says we're all family while meaning something very different by we. I didn't see any of it coming. I thought we were fine. I thought Sunday lunches were Sunday lunches. Gwen's office is in the plateau. I was there in 20 minutes. She had a file open on her desk when I walked in, and she turned her computer monitor toward me before I even sat down. Someone submitted a request to add your brother as co-owner of your parents' property, she said, with survivorship rights. Meaning if your parents pass, the property transfers to him, not to both of you. To him. I stared at the screen. My parents did this. The request came with a power of attorney document, Gwen said. Signed by your mother. My mother doesn't have power of attorney issues. She's completely. I know, Gwen said. That's why I called you. She slid a paper across the desk. It was the POA document. My mother's signature was at the bottom. I've seen my mother's signature my whole life. On school forms, on Christmas cards, on the back of birthday checks. This signature was close. It was very, very close. But it wasn't hers. I didn't cry in Gwen's office. I remember being surprised by that. I sat very still, looked at the document, and felt something go cold and quiet in my chest, like a window being shut. How did this get submitted? I asked. Through a third-party legal service, online, the kind your brother uses for his rental property filings. I recognized the formatting, and my parents were not involved. Your mother called me last week to ask about updating her will. She mentioned nothing about a POA. She seemed entirely herself. I thought about my father, about how he sometimes has trouble following long conversations now, about how he trusts my brother completely, the way fathers trust oldest sons, the way he always has. I thought about the Sunday lunches, how often my brother had quietly suggested that I didn't really understand the property's practical realities because I wasn't nearby, how his wife had started calling it the farm, as if she'd grown up there. How last Thanksgiving she had mentioned, almost in passing, the driving back and forth to Kelowna was getting hard on them both. I thought about something small that had happened in August. I had been visiting my parents in Kelowna for a long weekend. My mother had asked me to help her log into her online banking to check something, and when I sat down at her laptop, the browser had her email already open. I didn't read anything, but I noticed there was a draft in her drafts folder with my brother's name in the subject line. I thought nothing of it then. I thought about it now. I need to know everything. I said to Gwen. Everything you can legally tell me. She walked me through it. The document had been submitted 6 days ago. It hadn't been processed yet because Gwen had caught a discrepancy in the notarization, something technical about the commissioner's stamp. If she hadn't caught it, it likely would have gone through. What happens if it goes through? I asked. Your parents still own the property while they're alive, she said. But when they're both gone, the survivorship clause means it transfers directly to your brother. Your share of the estate, assuming no updated will, would be contested at best. At best. Simone. She folded her hands. This is a serious document. Someone went to significant effort to make it look legitimate. I drove home. I sat in my car in the parking garage for about 15 minutes without moving. Then I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, happy to hear from me, talking about what she'd made for dinner. She did not know. She had no idea. Whoever had done this had not told her, had not asked her, had copied her signature well enough to nearly fool a professional, and had sent it off hoping it would go unnoticed. I told her I was calling to check in. I didn't tell her anything else. Not yet. I want to tell you about a dinner that happened in October, a month before any of this. My brother and his wife came to Montreal for a conference he had, and we had dinner at a restaurant in Mile End. The four of us, the three of them and me. His wife spent most of dinner talking about how much the Eastern Townships have developed. She'd been looking at listings near Knowlton, she said. Just curious. She'd seen a property that sold for $2.4 million nearby. Isn't that something? She said it the way people say things they've rehearsed to sound casual. I said yes. The region had grown a lot. My brother said he'd been thinking that maybe our parents should consider their options while they were still healthy. Not to be morbid, just practical. I said our parents seemed happy with things as they were. His wife said very gently that sometimes older parents don't want to burden their children with the conversation, and someone has to take the initiative. I said I thought our parents were perfectly capable of making their own decisions. The conversation moved on. I forgot about it. I don't forget about it now. Here is what I did not do. I did not to my brother. I did not show up to that Sunday lunch. I did not tell anyone in my family what Gwen had found. Here is what I did. I called a lawyer, not a notary, a litigation lawyer, a friend of a friend named Pemberton, who operates out of a small office in Westmount, and who, when I explained the situation in a slightly too fast voice over the phone, said, "Slow down, tell me from the beginning, and yes, come in." Pemberton told me several things. First, the forged POA was a criminal matter, not just a civil one. If the signature was indeed forged, we were talking about fraud. Identity fraud, specifically, and potentially elder abuse given my father's medical history. Second, I should not tip off my brother that I knew anything. Not yet. Third, we needed a handwriting expert. Fourth, I should start keeping records. Every email, every text, everything. I went home that night and sat at my desk and looked at my phone and thought about all the Sunday lunches, all the times my sister-in-law said, "Your parents are so lucky to have someone nearby to help." And I heard warmth. And now I heard something else entirely. The handwriting expert was a woman in Ottawa who works with the RCMP and also takes private clients. Her name doesn't matter. What matters is that she looked at the document for 45 minutes, compared it against 3 authenticated samples of my mother's signature, and wrote a 12-page report concluding that the signature on the POA was highly consistent with simulated reproduction rather than authentic authorship. I read the phrase, simulated reproduction, and had to put the report down and make a cup of tea before I could continue. While I was waiting for her report, I had also been going through something else. 2 months earlier, my parents had mentioned, casually, the way they mention everything, that they had updated their online accounts to use a family password manager that my brother had set up for them. It was easier, they said. He'd helped them organize everything. Banking, email, the works. My brother had access to my mother's email. He knew her passwords. He had spent the better part of a year building exactly the kind of access that would make something like this possible, and every single step of it had been framed as help. I need to tell you about my mother's face when she found out. I drove to Kelowna in March. I didn't tell my brother I was coming. I told my parents I was surprising them with a visit, which I had done before, so it didn't seem strange. I sat at their kitchen table, the one I'd done homework at as a child, and I told my mother everything. I had Gwen's findings. I had the handwriting report. I had a printed timeline Pemberton had helped me put together. My mother went very still. Then she said, "He has the password to my email." I know. He set it up. He said it was so he could help us if we ever got locked out. She didn't cry right away. She asked to see the documents. She read them the way she reads everything, slowly, carefully, moving her lips slightly. My father read them too, leaning forward in his chair. When they finished, my father said something I've thought about every day since. He said, "I thought he wanted to help us." That's when my mother cried. I cried too. It would have been strange not to. We went to the RCMP. I want to be careful here because some things are still ongoing, but I can tell you what matters. The report was filed. The forged document was submitted as evidence. My mother provided a formal statement confirming she had not signed any power of attorney document and had not authorized any changes to the property's ownership structure. My brother, to his credit or perhaps to his lawyer's credit, said nothing for a long time. His wife, I found out later, had been the one to actually submit the documents. She had done it through the online service. The account used to log in had been created with an email address that was one letter different from my mother's actual address, a common fraud technique, Pemberton explained. Easy to miss in automated systems. When the investigator interviewed my sister-in-law, she said she'd been helping my parents organize things and had misunderstood the scope of what they'd authorized. Misunderstood? She had forged a notarized power of attorney document, used it to attempt to transfer a $2.4 million property, and she misunderstood. I want to tell you what happened to the property. My parents, after all of this, decided to put the farm in a family trust. Pemberton helped them set it up. The trust names both my brother and me as equal beneficiaries, with an independent trustee, a professional, someone with no connection to either of us, overseeing decisions about the land while my parents are still living. My parents retain full use of it and full decision-making authority during their lifetimes. When they're gone, both of us inherit equally and neither one of us can act unilaterally. The property cannot be sold, altered, or transferred without the trustee's sign-off. It is the most legally airtight thing I have ever seen. When Pemberton explained the structure to me, I thought, they built a trap, and the trap became the cage. My brother called me in April. First time we'd spoken since I went to Kelowna. He said he wanted to explain. I said I was listening. He said that things had gotten complicated, that the property situation was stressful, that his wife had been under a lot of pressure, that he had not fully known what she was doing. I said nothing. He said that he hoped we could move past this as a family. I said, I'm going to need more than that. There was a long pause, and then he said something that surprised me. He said, I should have stopped her. Not, she didn't do it. Not, this was all a misunderstanding. He said he should have stopped her, which meant he knew, which meant some part of him had watched it happen and said nothing. I don't know what to do with that. I'm still figuring it out. My sister-in-law was charged. I'm not going to give you the legal terminology because it varies by province and the proceedings are still active, but she was charged. My brother was not, though the investigation included him. There's a distinction between knowing something is wrong and being the one who submitted the document. That distinction matters legally. Whether it matters to me personally is something I'm still working through. My parents have not had them at the house since March. My niece and nephew, her kids, my brother's kids, my nephew who is 7 and has nothing to do with any of this and who I adore, are the part of this that I can't wrap up neatly. There is no clean ending there. I see them when I can. I send cards. I show up when I'm able to, and I try to make sure they know their aunt is not disappearing. The thing no one tells you about this kind of betrayal is that it's not one moment. You don't just feel shocked and then get to feel better. It comes in waves, in weird places. I was at the grocery store in November and I saw tourtière in the frozen food section and just stood there in the aisle for too long, thinking about all the Sunday lunches I thought were normal and weren't. I thought about all the times my sister-in-law had said, your parents are so lucky, and I had felt it as warmth. I thought about my father saying, I thought he wanted to help us, and how that sentence contains the whole thing, really. The whole wound. We assumed help was help. We assumed closeness was closeness. We assumed that the people setting up the password manager and coming for Sunday lunches and making tourtière were doing it for love. Some of them were. I have to believe my brother on some level was, but love without honesty is just proximity. And proximity is not the same thing as family. My mother called me last week. She had just come back from a walk with my father along the creek on the property. She said the ice was starting to break up, that the woodlot looks beautiful in March when the light comes through the bare trees at a certain angle. She said she'd been thinking she wanted to build a small deck off the back of the farmhouse, somewhere they could sit in the summers. I said that sounded perfect. She said, "It's going to be yours someday. I want you to love it." I do love it. I loved it before I knew what it was worth. I loved it when it was just the place we drove to in August as kids, where my grandfather's initials are carved in the door frame of the barn, where the creak sounds like something constant and old and nothing at all to do with money. I love it now too. The difference is I know what it costs to keep it. I've been thinking a lot lately about the word help. How many times I heard it and felt grateful. How many times it was used as a door. Something that looked like an opening, but was actually a way in. For someone else, to something that was never theirs. My brother set up my parents' password manager. He drove them to appointments. He called every Sunday. And I, living in Montreal, 2 provinces away, told myself this was love and that I was lucky my parents had someone nearby. I filled in every gap with the most generous explanation I could find. That's what you do with family. You assume the best because the alternative is too heavy to carry around. But I've learned that assuming the best is not the same as being naive. The difference is what you do when the evidence changes. When Gwen called me that morning, I had a choice. I could have told myself she was overreacting. I could have gone to that Sunday lunch, sat across from my sister-in-law, eaten the food, and told myself everything was fine. Part of me wanted to. That part of me understands exactly why people look away from things that are painful. Looking away is easier. It costs nothing up front. What it costs later is everything. The thing I keep coming back to is my father's face at the kitchen table in Kelowna. Reading that document, he is not a man who shows a lot of emotion. He grew up in a generation that considered stoicism a virtue, not a defense mechanism. But when he looked up from those pages, he looked like someone who had just found out the floor he'd been standing on wasn't solid. He said, "I thought he wanted to help us." And the hard truth, the one I sat with for months now, is that my brother probably did, on some level. I don't think he woke up one morning and decided to be a villain. I think he looked at that property and saw money, and then looked at his wife, and then let something happen that he knew wasn't right because stopping it would have cost him something. Comfort, a plan, a version of the future he'd already started building in his mind. That's not innocence, but it's also not the same as being the person who actually forged the signature. What I've learned is that integrity isn't tested when things are easy. It's tested exactly in moments like that one, when you know something wrong is happening, when stopping it would inconvenience you, when no one is watching. My brother failed that test. His wife failed it in a far more serious way. And I, by staying informed, by going to Gwen, by hiring Pemberton instead of making an angry phone call, I like to think I passed mine, even when it would have been so much simpler not to. Gwen caught a discrepancy in a commissioner's stamp. One small technical irregularity. If she had been less careful, less thorough, the document would have gone through and I might not have known until my parents were gone. The whole thing hinged on one person doing her job with precision and care. I think about that a lot. I think about how much of what protects us in life is invisible. The notary who double-checks. The handwriting expert who takes 45 minutes instead of 10. The lawyer who says, "Slow down. Tell me from the beginning." We spend so much energy worrying about the dramatic moments and so little appreciating the quiet, careful ones. The property is in a trust now. My parents walk the creek in March and talk about building a deck. My nephew sends me drawings in the mail because he's 7, and that's what 7-year-olds do, and I put them on my fridge and feel the particular ache of a situation with no clean ending. I don't know yet what my relationship with my brother will look like in 5 years. I don't know if there's a version of this we come back from. What I know is that the farm is still in the family. My grandfather's initials are still in the door frame. The creek still sounds the same. Some things, if you fight for them carefully enough, stay.